May I ask unanimous consent that I be allowed to speak as if in morning business for up to 15 minutes?
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm here on the floor today to celebrate a significant event in our country's history and in Rhode Island's. Every student of American history knows the story of the Boston Tea Party. We all learned about Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty dumping chests of tea into Boston Harbor to protest British taxation without representation. What many students don't know is that down in Rhode Island, more than a year earlier, a group of Rhode Island patriots made an even harsher challenge to the British Empire. One dark night in June of 1772. I'm here to tell their story. The episode began when, amid growing tensions with colonists, King George III moved the HMS Gaspee, an armed British customs vessel, into Rhode Island's Narragansett Bay. The Gaspee and its captain, Lieutenant William Duddingston, were known for destroying fishing vessels, seizing cargo, and flagging down ships only to harass, humiliate, and interrogate the colonials. As Nick Bunker, author of the book An Empire on the Edge, wrote, "This harassment did not sit well with Rhode Islanders, who had grown accustomed to a level of personal freedom unique in that time. To quote Bunker, even by American standards, Rhode Island was an extreme case of popular government." The chapter in his book in which he describes this is entitled "This Dark Affair, the Gaspee Incident." Bunker went on to say, out of all the colonies, Rhode Island was the one where the ocean entered most deeply into the lives of the people, and we wanted it free. In July of 1663, over 100 years before the Gaspee incident, King Charles II had granted a royal charter establishing the colony of Rhode Island and Providence plantations in New England. And the charter said it was to hold forth a lively experiment, that a most flourishing civil state may stand and best be maintained with full liberty in religious concernments. The lively experiment in Rhode Island blazed the path for American freedom of religion, a fundamental right of our great nation. In Rhode Island, what were then considered radical ideologies of freedom ran very deep. A century later, William Duddingston would learn just how deep as he went about harassing American vessels and confiscating their cargo. The British armed forces had come to regard almost every local merchant as a smuggler and a cheat, Bunker wrote. Rhode Islanders were fed up with the abuse. Something was bound to give. In March of 1772, local seamen and traders, led by John Brown, signed a petition against the Gaspee. They brought it to Rhode Island Chief Justice Stephen Hopkins, a political leader in Providence and a relentless advocate for liberty. To quote Nick Bunker, "For Brown and Hopkins, the only law they recognized was theirs, laid down by their assembly and their local courts. They saw no role in Rhode Island for the English laws that gave the Navy its authority." This in 1772. Chief Justice Hopkins provided a legal opinion saying that British officers needed to present their orders and commission to Rhode Island's governor before entering local waters. Well, Duddingston refused and indeed threatened to hang any man who tried to oppose the Gaspee. So the fuse was lit. It all came to a head on June 9th, 1772. Rhode Island Captain Benjamin Lindsay was sailing to Providence from Newport in his ship, the Hannah. He was accosted and ordered to yield for inspection by the Gaspee. Well, Captain Lindsay refused. He raced up Narragansett Bay despite warning shots fired at the Hannah. The Gaspee gave chase, and Captain Lindsay, who knew the waters of Rhode Island far better than did Duddingston, steered his ship north toward Patuxet Cove in Warwick, right over the shallow waters of Namquid Point. There, the lighter Hannah shot over the shallows, but the heavier Gaspee ran aground and stuck firm. The British ship and her crew were caught, stranded in a falling tide. They would need to wait many hours for a rising tide to free them again. According to Nick Bunker, as night fell, the Gaspee crew turned in, leaving only one seaman on the deck. Spotting an irresistible opportunity, Captain Lindsay sailed on to Providence. There he enlisted the help of John Brown, the respected merchant and statesman who had led that petition against the Gaspee back in March. Brown was from one of the most prominent families in the city. He ultimately helped found what we know today as Brown University. Brown and Lindsay rallied a group of Rhode Island patriots at Sabin's Tavern, down on what is now the east side of Providence, along the waterfront. Refreshments, no doubt, were served. Refreshed or not, the group resolved to end the Gaspee's menace in Rhode Island waters. That night, those raiders, led by what Nick Bunker called the maritime elite of Providence, set out with blackened faces, in longboats, and rowed down the bay with their oars muffled to avoid detection. They made their way to the stranded Gaspee and surrounded it. As Daniel Harrington recounted in a recent op-ed that he wrote in the Providence Journal, Captain Abraham Whipple spoke first for the Rhode Islanders, summoning Duddingston, "I am Sheriff of Kent County," expletive. "I have a warrant to apprehend you," expletive. "So surrender," expletive. It was, says Harrington, a classic Rhode Island greeting. And Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that Mr. Harrington's article be added to the record at the end of my remarks.
Without objection.
Lieutenant Duddingston, of course, refused Whipple's demand, and instead he ordered his men to fire upon anyone who attempted to board the Gaspee. The Rhode Islanders saw their advantage. They outnumbered the British, and they swarmed onto the Gaspee's deck. Shots rang out in the dark. Lieutenant Duddingston fell wounded in the arm and the thigh. That night, in the waters off Warwick, Rhode Island, the very first blood in the conflict that was to become the American Revolution was drawn by American arms. A little bit more than just tea over the side into Boston Harbor. As the Patriots commandeered the ship, Brown ordered one of his Rhode Islanders, a physician named John Mauney, to tend to Duddingston's wounds. Mauney was an able doctor and saved the lieutenant. Brown and Whipple took the captive English crew ashore, and then they returned to the despised Gaspee to rid Narragansett Bay of her detested presence once and for all. They set her afire. The blaze spread, reaching the ship's charges of gunpowder in the cannons, setting off explosions like fireworks. Ultimately, the flames reached the Gaspee's powder magazine, and the resulting blast echoed across Narragansett Bay as airborne fragments of the Gaspee splashed down into the water beneath a moonless sky. Nick Bunker wrote, "The British had never seen anything quite like the Gaspee affair. Their attack on the ship amounted to a complete rejection of the empire's right to rule." According to Dan Harrington's op-ed, King George III was furious and offered huge rewards for the capture of the rebels. Inquiries were made and nooses fashioned, but in the end, not one name was produced, as thousands of Rhode Islanders remained true to silence. The site of this historic victory is now named Gaspee Point, in honor of this incident and the audacious Rhode Islanders who accomplished it. According to Bunker, the Rhode Island Patriots successfully organized, quote, "a military operation 3 years ahead of its time that arose not merely from a private quarrel, but also a matrix of ideas." The ideas, Madam President, of liberty. Rhode Islanders have made a tradition of celebrating the Gaspee incident, and this year marks the 50th annual Gaspee Days celebration in Warwick. Over the years, we celebrate by marching in the annual parade as we recall the courage of the men who fired the first shots and drew the first blood in the quest for American independence. I would like to thank the Gaspee Days Committee for their continuing efforts to host this annual celebration, and to my friend, State Representative Joe McNamara, for his work each year in making this event so special. I come to the floor every year at this time to speak about the burning of the Gaspee, because as proud as I am of what those brave Rhode Islanders did back in 1772, I'm also disappointed that their story has largely been lost to history outside our little state. I hope these speeches will help new generations to learn about this important American event. In Rhode Island, of course, we will never forget. As Mr. Harrington wrote in his piece in the Providence Journal, "Through the ages, noble Rhode Islanders have named their daughters Hannah, in honor of the ship that long ago led a fledgling young country toward independence and helped create the finest nation ever born of man." I thank the chair, and I yield the floor.